So this is an update of the Planets and Stars guide, I guess. Um, 4 years ago, I updated the Lost 2019 one, and there really isn't much new stuff to add. So mainly, what this is just kind of going over the stars classic Trek and TNG used, and saying like, okay, yeah, basically there can't be planets. So. But there's some updates here and there. So I'll just to start with Akamar here, which is well, a lot of these names they just chose names. It was in the other commentary because they sounded cool, and they just went through a catalog and said, "Oh, that's a cool name. I'll just use that." Not realizing that. Well, but would there be planets? But really, now that people have found, now that they've found exoplanets, and let's see, there needs to be some explanation for that as well. We also have the Hubble and the James Webb, and the James Webb is working. They often have on the when they report on the James Webb stuff, and some of these other radio telescope stuff as well. Same thing. Oh, we have a picture of something. You technically don't. You have an infrared picture or a radio image, which is not actually how the picture looks. It's like they've altered it to make it look like an image we can see, but really it's a radio image, or it's the radiation image, or the afterglow of the heat from the image that they're looking at, and the chemical composition. They can't literally see a planet in another solar system. I mean, we can't do that. You see the star, but not the planet. The wobble or this little dot, but that's it. Now that has improved since last time. And scientists and guys have said they need to build they need to build a telescope on the far side of the moon, and the whole moon, a big old array on the moon, and then they'll be able to see the atmospheres of planets, because then it'll be bigger. Because you can't just galaxies and stars are brighter. So when they thought of the Star Trek writers were just like, well, back in the day, well, they just looked through a catalog and said, oh, this sounds cool, let's use it. So the first star on their list, according to the Memory Alpha website, Akamar, the Gatherer's planet from TNG later on, is technically Theta Eridani. And it's a trinary, and the stars are too close, so it is kind of an example of the three-body problem. And so there wouldn't be planets in orbit of it. Now there's a later star trinary that isn't. That is part of a popular current book series, but we'll get into that later. Yeah, so I'm just kind of reading off these stars here. Okay, then we have I'm doing it better than the other one, so I got it like right in front of me. Okay, then and it doesn't matter how many light years off they are, because they just chose a name and a blue giant star trinary system thing. Well, they just figured, no one will check. It's the 60s, no one will check. Yeah, it's 60 years later. Yeah. Then we have Alcar and Mizar. Those are two bright blue young stars. 82 light years off in that association of stars. I believe that's in the Ursa Major area, Mount Ursa Major. And as seen from Earth, it's always interesting how Star Trek sometimes would include like a constellation where they would throw the Bayer name and the other name backward, and they would say this is Beta 2, or this is Sigma Iota or something, where you can't really have that if it's the Greek nomenclature for the designation from back in the day. They wouldn't put the Beta or the Alpha or the Omicron or the Gamma after what it is. They wouldn't do that. It'd be before. And it only refers to the stars in the constellation as they're going around. So yeah, the brightest star in the constellation, and that would be Alpha, and then everything underneath that would be lower. And luminosity, not necessarily distance. So it's luminosity, not distance. Some of these stars are further away than they thought they were. Some of them are closer than they thought they were. Most of them, these stars in this list, are bright giants, and could not have planets. So Alcor and Mizar, for instance, are young, bright giant stars. Aldebaran Rival of Mars. Aldebaran. 67 light years off. The Alpha Tauri in the constellation Taurus is an orange giant. Aldebaran. And yeah, so it's kind of bright. So probably no planets. Probably no Can't get any Aldebaran whiskey because like in Star Trek, classic Trek, because yeah, there's probably nothing there. Everything's flash fried. It's an older star, so that's good. And then mention Algol and the Algolians. And yeah, that's near one of the Canary space planets, the autonomous planet, relatively. A little further off than that. Algol is the demon star. Algol's the demon star. Only called that because in this ancient times it was part of this creature, mythological creature, and it was this eye. Because it was actually a binary pair. They were orange and blue, and they were going back and forth. And they had really good eyesight, they could tell. So, Algol. The Algolians were mentioned in Strange New Worlds. So that is new data. But, yeah. But they just figured, sure, why not? Next is Alpha Carinae in the constellation Carina. I thought there were a bunch of stars in Carina that would be cool because Carina, technically the Sol system passed through Carina like a million years ago or something, and I thought I did this big elaborate thing that was going to be like a spin-off of Canary Space, the old Canary Space from the storybooks back in the day. It's going to be a spin-off. It's going to go to the Carina Association to explore these planets. The big elaborate thing, all these notes and everything from this thing in roughly 2018 or so. And 2019. It wasn't mentioned in the story, but it was back then. And because it failed, probably because the site that was finding the Carina stars was actually a fictional site, and they were doing their own thing, and it went away. So yeah. Also, the Internet Stellar Database I think is still around, but this other site disappeared. So yeah, all those stars were irrelevant. Of which Mark Card said, why don't you just make stuff up they did with most of those stars? But that's what we ended up doing later. But, yeah. So yeah, then we come to Alpha Carinae. It's a blue-white giant star, 309 light years away, and mentioned in TOS. The Canopus, the star Canopus, not Canopus, Canopus. Yeah, the Canopians from TOS. Yeah, can't be. Okay, now we get to Alpha Centauri, which is several different stars in Canary space because Sol is as well. There's a lot of parallel Earths in the classic Trek, like Miri and the Magnoroma planet and the Mob planet, and the Mob planet kind of, and the other ones where they adopted early 1920s technology there, and now it's 100 years later, so it's the 2020s there. But yeah, so and Miri is the planet with the children that were incredibly old, but they didn't age. But when they hit puberty, they start to die. And McCoy cured them, and they were visited in the Silly Track a couple of times, and it sort of became a pseudo other planet for the Miri planet. It became a pseudo Evergreen State, San Jose State planet. The semesters, fictional adventures people having manifest in reality because they can do that. You see the whole Silly Trek Cillian thing was okay. The gag going on there was that Q in the Next Generation time period wanted to annoy Captain Picard because he didn't like children, and so he's all, "Oh, I've got the perfect place for you, Jean-Luc." Ha. We thought of this at Pine Hill, so we're like, what would happen if Q gave us the Q powers after he tried to give it to Riker on one episode, and he gave us the powers? That would be both interesting and scary at the same time. We would create a universe, go into it, do whatever we want, and we did. And so many of these planets are copying the other ones from it, and there seems to be like, even the Canary space planets with their dark gray and your lit gray or your gray aliens is kind of that, and the Vega with the lizard guys being from Vega. That's also their Draconians, Draconius, although they were not dragons, oddly enough. They were just people. That kind of thing. the Cillians immediately like try to destroy the universe when they go in there. In the early stories, they at one point they go to a planet where the TV mogul who used to run CNN back in the day, in old movies, Ted Turner. He's on the planet. He's been manifested into reality by us. I'm assuming he was a copy of him, and so we had to go to the planet and stop him. So we did, and yeah, their planet was destroyed by this. Silly. Because he was colorizing old movies, and we didn't want him colorizing black and white movies, and we punished him because he was being bad. That's very in the children shall lead type of deal there. Very Charlie X actually, and we did encounter a version of Charlie X in Silly Trek as well. We had him being played by a con figure, and we encountered him in an episode where we went to the Leonis system. That was cool, the Wolf in the Fold system. And we blew it up. Yeah. Sure, why not? In the 2400s. So, but then we unblew it up. We put it back because we're cute. Because our fan film should be the one that centers the universe. So we have different films than screwy stuff that we did. And Alpha Centauri, though. Alpha Centauri has often been the subject of sci-fi movies and things like that. A current book series and spin-off series. It's either Netflix or Apple. One of those. I think it might be Apple. The Three Body Problem. The Z book. The Z Lin book. The Trisolarians. They're supposed to be from Alpha Centauri, but they can't be. Because Alpha Centauri is not an example of the Three Body Problem. The very title of the book is moot at that point. Same reason you can't have, solar destroying weapons. We'll get on that later, but yeah, because that wouldn't work. But yes, so you have the Trisolarians, and they can't be from Alpha Centauri, and they're on their way to Earth in that story. But they wouldn't be. Alpha Centauri was not explored in Star Trek, hardly at all, until this season of our series in there. The Companion Obsession episode, where we also went to the companion planets, the two Alpha Canarius. They mean Alpha Canarius Majoris and Epsilon Canarius Majoris, and they mean Gamma Canarius Majoris. That's what they mean. But they said Canary system, even though that would be really confusing. But no, it's Canis Major. It's supposed to be the big dog, Canis Major. Alpha Canis Major is Cirrus, and yeah, they should have just said they were from that. That should have been where Zephyr Cochrane went. He should have went to Cirrus. That would have made sense. Because back in his time, nine light years would have been a lot. But back to Alpha Centauri. 4 light years from Earth, it has Proxima, which has a planet, and Alpha and Beta may not have a planet. But see, the reason it's not the three-body problem is because Proxima Centauri. Okay, 1 AU is the distance between the Sun and the Earth, roughly an orbit of 365 days. So if you have A and B in the center of the Alpha Centauri group, and they are at a mean distance of 80 AU, but they orbit between 30 and 80 AU, so it's an elliptical orbit between the orbit of Saturn and Uranus. They could have planets at 1 AU on both of those stars. That would be fine. That would be habitable. Or that there's a G-type star and a K-type star. And so I put lots of planets there. Our Rhyolitka planets. The Flodi is probably in orbit of Alpha, that star. Desiree from Space Vanguards is in orbit of the A star. Rebia is the B star. It's also called Rebel Terra in some of the Cillian stories, but it's Rebia. In space, but in the warped core, it's called warp cores. It's called space timeline. It's called warp core. It's called Waymarker planet, and it had like bird aliens and dog aliens and stuff, similar to the other one, but not the same. But Desiree has the Techites, the dog aliens. Waymarker also includes Termarellians from Mark's cards as well. And they're in that. Yeah, but the Zuri in the revised Vanguards, which used to be Starcrackers, they are more Orion looking. They look like Orions, the Orion Pirates. Kind of interesting. But just to make them look different, because we couldn't make them look like lizards with action figures. So we have. Moving on from Alpha Centauri, Moving on to Alpha Cygnus, Deneb, 2,615 light years away. It is a blue supergiant star. Deneb is 4 or 5 different stars in Star Trek. It's explained in the original guide. They just liked the name Deneb part, like Rigel part. That's how they used Rigel. And then back to speaking of that, I'm going to skip back to Alpha Centauri. They're still kind of meandering back and forth on the planet encountered in Enterprise, Rigel 10. Now, if the Enterprise show was a prequel where they couldn't go out as far, so they didn't go to Rigel. That isn't where they were. They couldn't have gone to Pi 3 Orionis. That's too far away. That's the Orion planet. That's not where they were. They were there later, but not in that pilot episode. They were in orbit of Proxima. That's where Rigel 10 is. That's where it would have to be, because that would only be 4 light years away, and they just jumped there in the pilot. So it's clearly, that's where they were. They were at Rigel Centaurus, which would be like 4 light years off. That's where Rigel 10 is. Rigel Centaurus 10 is probably in Proxima, the Proxima planet. But it isn't inhabited. I don't think so. It's a flare star. But it's far enough away. It's 550 AU orbit, millions of miles around the other 2 stars. Means it's not an example of 3-body problem. It doesn't contact them. It's just there. That's just where we see it. And then we're going to go on to Alpha Cygnus Deneb. Yeah, the blue supergiant. And that's why is that used so much? Deneb, everything. Alpha Iridani is the next one, and it is Arcanar. And it's 139 light years off. It is a blue-white binary giant star, 2 of them, and a dwarf. A little too bright. Well, these stars were the brightest stars they could see, and they just wrote them all down. Show. Mainly TOS, little ends. Alpha Iridani is referred to in Enterprise as Arcanar, and it's said to be the other star, but that's not where it is. That's not it. Alshane is next. Alshane is the next one. It's 44 light years off. This was mentioned on Star Trek Discovery. That was kind of fun. Beta Achille. That's also been called Beta Achille. It's a bright blue trinary. Could be an example of the 3-body problem. But it's very young if it's bright blue. So the different star types genuinely be a fine girl gives me. Yeah. So you have like the O and B stars are like blue, white, blue. Then you have F, and F stars are white, yellow. G is yellow in the spectrum, looking like the spectrum. K, like Vulcan, is more of an orange, and M is a red, or a little red star. So it could be a red star. So it's the spectral color of them. It's the spectral color and temperature of them. The sun is a G-type star. And contrary to the Supergirl movie and the other Supergirl canon, there can be no green stars. The green stars are in fact yellow G-type stars, making their entire shtick about the superhero people moot, because they said the G-type star powers them, but no, the green one just depowers them. No, it wouldn't. Yeah. If they're thinking a blue star, then it would make them godlike. It would make them even more powerful. Because if this cooler M-type star makes them normal, and the K one probably just makes them a little weak, then the G-type star makes them hyperactive and do stuff. A blue-white star would make them godlike. An F-type star would really screw with them a little bit. So that doesn't make sense in that universe. So, and then we come to Alshane. Alshane is a trinary. I believe that's also the star from Forbidden Planet that inspired Forbidden Planet. Yeah. I'm not going to go into where the other stars necessarily were. That I don't need to do that. In other shows. Archinar, Alpha Iridani is Archinar. Brian said that before. Altair. Altair water. Altair. It's from Alpha Achille. It's a blue-white star. Well, they're very young stars. All the blue-white stars are pretty young. So they're you know, you're gonna get your thing here. Arcturus is 37 light years off, and it is a red giant, mentioned on Star Trek. But as a planet, it has planets, supposedly. Argelius, I can't seem to find it, so I think it's just a made-up one. Epsilon Eridani, here's a nod to the Axanar show that we had nothing to do with, but we talked about on our channel in the early days, or of Discovery there, before Discovery, the Axanar. That's the planet of the Axanar people. Yeah, that's Epsilon Eridani. And if it was supposed to be the binary stars from the Battle of the Binary Stars, which it kind of was, probably the wrong area, but that's fine. Somewhere in the Eridanos. And then, of course, Procyon is Andor, but not Cassian Andor from Star Wars. No, Star Trek thought of the name first. They had those blue guys back in the 60s. Lucas ripped the name off. So, Andor, that's a good name. Yes. Actually, Procyon is a little, probably the right age to have planets, but it's very hot. And it has a white dwarf, which means that at some point that white dwarf was a red giant and probably cooked all the planets in the system. Same thing with Sirius. The Syrian lizards are not possible. Well, they're Sirius. They're very similar analogs of the dog stars, two dog stars. That's probably what they meant with the other ones, but they didn't go there. Yeah. Oh, Alpha Irigae, the quadruple, the Capella stars. Probably the inspiration for Battlestar Galactica's Caprica stars. I will mention that. Oh, and then there's another Deneb. There's another main Deneb that's out there from the Kessla planet. And Epsilon Indi, which is mentioned in TNG. And then there's Mira, which is related to those Mira variables, and you can't have a planet in orbit on that. Epsilon Indi is a little young and it has a debris disk, so even though it's close, 12 light years, it doesn't have, it's too close. It's too young. Mira is a variable star, it's the Mira variable, so if they have a planet in orbit of that, it's probably cooked. A variable star would have variable flares. It's a mess. Mizar and Alcor, of course, are the unconfirmed in Star Trek, but yes. But I'm sure they visited them. Yeah, they visited them, but they just used the name, I think. Omicron Ceti is another star system I mentioned in there. 300 light years off. Probably, yeah, it's also probably too young. Ophiuchus, 19 light years off. I think they mean 70 Ophiuchus, and originally in the earlier drafts of Miri, it was supposed to be an Ophiuchus star, but then they changed it. Yeah. Now, here's one where they retconned it upon the suggestion of the Kal Kat star. Where is the star of the Orions? It can't be Bellatrix, although it kind of should be, because you got Betelgeuse, Rigel, and Bellatrix, and the other ones in Orion, and they're all giant stars. Betelgeuse is too big; it's a big red giant star. Bellatrix is the blue giant. I think it's the blue giant. Yeah, Bellatrix is Alpha Orionis is Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse would be kind of funny. Bellatrix is Gamma Orionis. One of the Orionises, Gamma Orionis. A female warrior. So that what they were probably thinking of is Bellatrix when they thought of the Orions. They were like, I know they're supposed to be the slaves in it, but then they changed that in Enterprise and said, no, they're actually enslaving the men. They have powers. They have mind powers. So in Lower Decks, they kind of explained that because there's an Orion girl on the ship. Serving on the ship, apparently. Yeah, Tendi. And she's, the character is also in Silly Trek because there's an older version of her in that. It's not played by the same actor. But yeah, it's supposed to be her, and yeah. So the Orions, they reestablished the star in the story. So it's Pi 3 Orion, Orionis, which is closer and more sun-like. than Bellatrix, which is a big blue giant. So, okay, fine. But they said they were colonizers and they've colonized the galaxy and helped out, and they met the proto-Vulcans too, where the Vulcans went out on space. Romulans went out into space too during the diaspora of Romulus, in the sundering of the Vulcans. So it's possible they encountered them as well and took them there. Pi 3 Orionis is only 26 light years off, and it fits with Enterprise as well. So it works. It's in the same general area. Although they wouldn't call themselves that, because they're from an alien, they would be like, we're not called Orions, it's your Earth constellation. Why would you do that? Anyway, then we come to Polaris, Strange New Worlds, 445 light years off. It's a yellow supergiant. Unlikely that Polaris would have planets around, even if it sounds cool. Pollux and Castor are, of course, part of a group, moving group. 34 light years off. It's the Olympian planet from TOS. The Olympian aliens. Well, sure. And now we come to Omega Leonis, the current official but unofficial location of Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. 112 light years off. The problem is not Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. The problem is where it is, and in relation to Romulus and Vulcan. How far off was the sundering when the Vulcans split off and the Romulans came up, did their own thing? How far off are they? Because the Romulan supernova, which they retconned into the star nova, would have hit the Klingon Empire too. It would have blown up that as well if it could do that, because they were right next door to the Romulans. And then it would have blown up Vulcan, because they had to be not that far off. They were almost pre-warp at that point. But I guess some sources say they weren't, and they had warp. But yeah, some say it's really confusing. So Omega Leonis is Kronos, the Klingon homeworld. It's a spectroscopic binary, which means that it looks like a binary, but you have to separate it with a telescope. There's a spectroscopic, there's an optical binary too, which is confusing because spectroscopic kind of means optical. An optical binary means that it's not really a binary. We just see it from here so far away that it looks like the other stars next to it. It's not. Like Mizar and Alcor. Then you have your... and yeah, by the way, this is not an official astronomer thing. This is a sci-fi thing. So I may be wrong on some of this a little bit. So yeah, we have a. Then we come to Regulus, Alpha Leonis, in the same area as the Klingon planet. Alpha Leonis Regulus could be seen by the Klingon and the Regulon bloodworms and all that. It's a blue-white star. It can't have planets because it's a blue-white young star. But I'm sure the Klingons are quite aware of Alpha Leonis. It's probably right out there. I hope you see it. Then we come to Rigel, which is actually Beta Rigel, not Alpha Rigel. It's Beta Rigel. Yeah, Beta Rigel. Yeah, because Beta Rigel. Beta Rigel is. They mentioned that in Star Trek a bunch of times. There's like 10 different versions of Rigel. They don't mean the supergiant star. They can't possibly mean that. And if they do, then they what do they mean? Blue supergiant. Do they mean Betelgeuse in that case? I wonder if they do. Because that would kind of make sense if it was Betelgeuse. They could get to that. Sigma Draconis is 17 light years off, mentioned in Star Trek. Tau Ceti, mentioned in Star Trek. And Tau Cygni, the Sigma Draconis could have, it's a K-type star, could have planets. It's a little youngish, but probably. Tau Ceti, the same thing. Tau Cygni. Vega, 26 light years off. Homeworld of the Letamok from Canary Space. Well, a sort of homeworld, even though it's too young and it's too blue. It's a colony. They settled there. They left the I think it was the Theta Pavonis system above the Canary planet, Delta Pavonis, and they left that one and they went to this other, let's say, it's a colony, a sundering kind of thing, very similar to the Romulans. And yes, my space stuff was so close to the Star Trek stuff that I was trying not to spoof that it ended up being Star Trek. So I put it in the canon with Silly Trek instead. And the Vanguards thing, the same thing. So, yeah, then we come to Vulcan. the Vulcan. Well, not really. 40 Eridani, which they did establish was Vulcan. Enterprise. Uh, Almost an example of the three-body problem, though. You've got a K-type star with a red dwarf and a smaller white dwarf out on the edge of it. But any such planets would have been fried when those two were red giants. No, they would have been cooked. Unless we don't understand how white dwarfs and red dwarfs really work. We've never seen one blow up and turn into a white dwarf. So we don't know whether they've apparently observed at least the afterglow of neutron stars colliding, doing a gravitational wave, and they've seen like other. I don't know how they can see that in another galaxy though. That's a little weird. They've seen some of those in other galaxies. How did they see that? They didn't see that. They detected the waves of it. They didn't actually see that happen. They detected the waves. We can't see stars in other galaxies explode. No, it's something else happened. We saw the heat afterglow or something. No. If we could see stars in other galaxies, we can see planet surfaces. We can't. Yeah, it's a little off when they say that. But yes, we see some stuff. Yeah, we can see atmospheres of some planets and stuff. We can probably see tabby star planets or not. But yeah, we should be able to see the Centauri ones real good. I don't know why we can't see it. No, that's Centauri now. Look. And then I mentioned Iota Geminorium, which was featured in a Silly Trek episode. It's a turbo planet, but Iota Geminorium itself is a giant, so it's a star that's an optical binary behind it. And Argelius, is from Wolf in the Fold, was a made-up Star Trek name, but it sounds cool. So, yeah. And it was also one of the Leonis stars. It's a Leonis related star, and I blew it up, but then I got it back. Canaris Beta Epsilon Alpha. Wirus Beatrix. Yeah. Let's see. So this is probably going to be hard to watch, but yeah, at least you can see me. So Epsilon Canaris Majoris. Yeah, they called it Epsilon Canaris, which isn't a thing. But if they called it Epsilon Canaris Majoris, it would be a thing. So there's a star at here, Epsilon Canaris Majoris, and Gamma Canaris Majoris, which is where they found the companion on the planet in the recent episode. Silly Trek. Starship locations. Asteris is Alpha Canis Majoris. And for some reason, back in the day, we thought this star was red. Cirrus. It's never red. It's always blue-white. I would think it was red. The shining one. Never red. Never red. No, I was just wrong, I guess. Mirzam, not Mira, is Beta Canis Majoris. 400 light years away. That was an episode. They think that Ferenginar may be in the Lyra constellation. They're making stuff up. Epsilon Ceti is said to be Risa, but that can't be right. It's only 1 billion years old. And I couldn't find where Romulus is. So what I did in the Silly Trek version is I said that Romulus was Rana, which is a star 30 light years from here. It's an F-type star, F-type slightly variable star that's slightly hotter than it's a F4. It's a subgiant. It said if that was that star and the Romulans messed with it, and they made that go supernova, then it would make sense that that's where that is. But then it's not as close to the Klingons as you might think. The Klingons are in Leonis. But if it's 100 light years off, how did they get there? They wouldn't have gotten there in hundreds of years. They were in slow boats or something. Some of that doesn't make sense. So before I end the whole thing, the Andy Weir book, they didn't address this really in the Star Trek interview. They should have. He created a alien thing that's dimming stars, an alien microbe, but it's a macrobe, not a microbe. It has macrobe properties, but it's a microbe, which is weird in itself. And it can create a fuel. It's what's sort of like the protoculture from Robotech, or it's like the deculture from the other thing from Macross, the fuel that powers the Inbit, and the other ones. There's three different fuels going on there. And they combined the series. So this astrophage stuff can dim stars, except it isn't dimming Tau Ceti because they're able to go to Tau Ceti. They send a ship to Tau Ceti to in the story Project Hail Mary is the name of the movie, and based on the book, and they send this guy and a crew out to Tau Ceti to find out why that star is not dimming. How they can see that, I don't know. But how they can tell they're dimming or not, I don't know. Because if they're 10 years away, because usually starlight, like when you're looking at a star, you're seeing it the way it looked back when through the light years. So looking at Tau Ceti, it's what it looked like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Now, a star 400 light years away, seeing it how it looked 400 years ago. Andromeda Galaxy, that's how it looked millions of years ago. We know where it is now. If you just see it how it looked millions of years ago. How we can see the galaxy, well, it's because it's a bright smudge out there and they can see it. So that's where it was millions of years ago. So the astrophage is eating stars. I want to know how this stuff is able to eat stars and be used as fuel, because in the story, it's like protomatter kind of from. I just and the other thing is also like protomatter. Yeah, can mess up a reaction within a star. So it's like a Tatsukatat from Next Generation. It's like the thing in Star Trek Generations. The bad guy had the tricobalt weapon or whatever it was. Yeah, it's like that. He basically stole it from Star Trek, but it's destroying stars, and so it's eating stars. Yeah, I want to know how this thing is able to get near a solar corona without being flash fried into dust, like gone, just gone, because it would be. The solar corona is 1,000,000 degrees. It's way hotter than the star itself. That's because it's pushing the wind from all the directions, the solar radiation. So yeah, that thing would be destroyed. That whatever it is, it's just like it has to be Q or some kind of Q-like being that's doing it. And then why? What's their motivation for decimating stars? Doesn't make sense. It's a very silly track, but yeah. But we just didn't know any better. We were cute. So the whole premise of the book doesn't work because it's the astrophage that doesn't make sense. They didn't want to address that in the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing. They had only addressed that, oh, by the way, the Epsilon Eridani aliens couldn't exist on that planet because the planet was unconfirmed after the book was written. Took the planet away. Well, actually, Andy where I met him a couple times at conventions. Actually, there is a planet. It just doesn't do what you think it does in the movie. Well, that's fine. There's a planet, but it doesn't orbit that way. That's okay. That's fine. Actually, it's a rock creature. It's a boy and his dog, basically a guy and a talking dog sidekick robot thing. But instead of being a robot, it's a little asymmetrical creature, rock creature. Cute movie. That shuts your brain off. It's fine. Anyway, this was Stars and Planets, and it's sort of a pseudo update. Just basically reading Stars and Planets. In the Silly Trek universe, there is a planet called Flodi. It's got to be in the Centauri system. It's got to be. Far Out is further away, of course, because it's called Far Out. Not really sure what that is. Didn't really need to be sure what that is. Considering they're a Q, they can probably make anything they want. And there's a bunch of the Waymarker planets. Eldani, I think, is Tau Ceti. And that one. But there's that Waymarker is the Centauri planet. Yeah, something like that. Or supposed to be, but it's like a parallel Earth. Vanguards and Canary Space and them are parallel Earths. So, because it can't just be Earth in an analog for Centaurus, it has to be something like it, where there's a timey-wimey thing happening, and it's the 2480s there, a little bit later than now. In terms of the Cillian timeline, it would be 2403, 2404, probably early 2404 coming up on it, and So, because it would be approximately 40 years after 2364, the beginning of the next generation. Mm. Oh, so it'd either be late 23, 24, 3. Yeah, so that started in October of 87. So, yeah, it'd be just coming up on, yeah, next year. So we're in 2403 then. We're going to be in 2403. if it's going by that. And Star Trek is 60 years old. So, yeah.